Hi, ladies.
Hello.
So I would love to give you all the opportunity to just briefly introduce yourself and talk about how did you get started in this work? You know, where does the passion really come from? Elizabeth, do you want to start? I can't hear Elizabeth. Do we have her muted? Elizabeth, we can't hear you. Do we have you? Can we hear her? All right, Elizabeth, hold that thought. We're going to come right back. We can see you, and you look beautiful, by the way. Laura, do we have you this morning?
I hope so. Let me get
there he is. Hi, Laura. Thanks so much for joining us. Can you tell me kind of where your passion for working in diversity, equity, inclusion really came from?
Absolutely. You know, I think this has always been something that's really important to me. And I was lucky enough that Royal Canin allowed me to start exploring this a little bit around 2018 with the development of the Women's Leadership Forum. And I also began serving with the Women's Leadership Development Initiative in the larger veterinary profession around that same time, but quickly realized this is not just a women's issue. It's not just about women. There's so many intersectionalities, and it's such a larger conversation. So I've been lucky enough to be able to get more involved with the efforts that we're doing as an organization, not only with Royal Canin, but larger with Mars.
Great. Good morning to you as well, Melissa. Can you hear me this morning?
Good morning. I can hear you.
Hi. Well, Melissa, I'm really excited to chat with you as well. Can you tell me just a little bit of background of kind of how you got started on this journey as well?
Sure. For me, it starts with my father, who was involved in the civil rights movement and wrote several books on ethics and justice. So conversations around our family dinner table were probably unusual compared to a lot of families. So we were talking about a lot of these issues when I was a kid. And after joining Only Natural Pet, I realized there was an opportunity for me to bring some of my passion in some of these areas to the team. They were just starting their journey, and I had just started with them, and it was a good time, I guess, to bring us together.
Perfect. Thank you for that perspective. Elizabeth, do we have you back? Still can't hear her. I promise, Elizabeth, we're working on it. We want to hear from you. We'll get working on it. While we're working on it, Melissa, I'd love if you could share some perspective. I'd love that you talk about your passion coming from the civil rights movement, but from more of an organizational point of view, what does this journey and the evolution of your DEI work at Only Natural Pet look like?
It really started for us when we began our journey to become certified as a B Corporation. And that was around 2019, and in the years leading up to that, we started to develop some goals around diversity and inclusion. So when you're becoming certified as a B Corporation, the work is fairly extensive, and you take a look inward and evaluate where you are as a company and consider the opportunities, begin to form goals, start those conversations about how you implement ideas. And then from there, we kind of went down a path of step by step, which I'm happy to share when we're ready for that.
Great. Laura, do you want to talk about how this journey has been at Royal Canin?
Yeah, so, I think there have been various initiatives over time, but in 2020, we really, with the larger Mars organization, made a much, much firmer commitment that really is centered around a lot of ambitious goals. And at that same time, Royal Canin invested not only with what we're doing internally, but with some of our very important stakeholders, the veterinary community. We all know how important that group is for the health of our pets, which is a lot of the reason why we're all here. And we were a founding member of the Diversified Veterinary Medicine Coalition at that same time. So we've got a lot of exciting things happening internally, as well as some external stakeholder work that we're really proud of.
Great. All right, Elizabeth, it looks like you got some help. There she is! Yay! Great.
I keep wanting to jump in. Thank you all for your patience. I'm not sure what happened there, but looks like we're back up and running.
Perfect. Well, Elizabeth, we'd love to get you caught up. Do you want to share with us how diversity, equity, inclusion became important to you, and also what does that journey look like for Earth Animal?
Yeah, so really, I began at Earth Animal back in January of 2019, and at that time was tasked with the actually a really awesome job of helping build a culture. Got it. I've got IT here. Everybody's great. We're all good.
Thanks, IT.
We're live at the conference. We're good. Thank you.
All right.
Oh boy.
Enjoy.
So really, it was back in 2019. We're tasked with helping develop this amazing culture and help build Earth Animal to become a global brand. And so that's when the journey began. But really, I think realistically, it wasn't until George Floyd's murder that we took a good hard look at what we were doing and what we were doing, and kind of did a self-audit and then really set specific goals around our agenda at that time.
Great. Well, Elizabeth, I know Earth Animal has been really great in taking advantage of the project offerings that PSC has been offering. Are there any successes both within those projects or setbacks? How has this journey been going?
You know what? There's been, I think with everything, there's amazing successes and then setbacks, and especially in the time that we're in this COVID world where you feel like you take 10 steps forward and then you're forced to kind of sit back a little bit. But through the PSC, we started our learning and education programs with some of the incredible workshops, and I encourage everybody to take advantage of them with the equity group, and that helped really launch. There's so many pieces of this journey, but one big one is education and getting all of our shareholders and stakeholders in the company involved and on the same page. And through the workshops with the PSC, we began to do that and build that. And so those were incredible, steps forward, definitely.
Thank you for that call out, Elizabeth. We also thank you for inviting the PSC team to attend those workshops with you. I found them really impactful as well. Melissa, you gave us a little teaser that you were going to tell us about this journey. What successes and setbacks have you had at Only Natural Pet?
Yeah, so early on, it was things like creating a vendor code of conduct in partnership with Pet Sustainability Coalition, of course, to set expectations with suppliers, improving and publishing an employee manual with specific language around diversity and inclusion, fostering discussions around what is an inclusive work environment, and then in more recent years, the last couple of years, developing a D&I 365 strategy kind of organized by 3 pillars. So people, culture, and community. And I like to refer to it just as You Belong, where we celebrate diversity and create an inclusive environment, wanting to make all team members, feeling like they belong. And under those 3 pillars, people, culture, community, then we have all of the activities, trainings, commitments, and that kind of thing. And in terms of successes and setbacks, I definitely would reiterate the COVID situation, a lot of activities and events that we had planned, conversations that are a lot harder to have with virtually, a lot of things that had to be canceled. The successes would certainly be just starting the conversation, going to meetings and just talking about ourselves and our backgrounds. You Belong bulletin boards throughout our workspaces. So this is a place where we can post cultural calendars or upcoming events, participating in the local pride celebrations, And this year in particular, we've been expanding our supplier code of conduct and completing some first steps in participating in a belonging and leadership series training for some of our leaders.
And that's amazing, Melissa, to be expanding your DEI influence, not just at only Natural Pet, but as your supply chain as well. That's a significant endeavor. So thank you for sharing. Speaking of significant endeavors, Laura, you're not just trying to tackle Royal Canin, you're taking on the entire veterinary field. What kind of successes, setbacks, good stories can you share with us?
Well, there's certainly things in both of those spaces, but I think for Royal Canin, one of the most amazing successes has been the development and creating the space for our associate resource groups. For example, Women of Mars. We have a Pride group, Black Advisory Council, just to name a few. And I love that we've already talked about the impact of COVID. I think there's also been some positive things. I think those groups really took off during that time, and when we were all missing that connection, it was really a great way to connect as a business and associates and understand each other better, to work on that more inclusive environment. And with regards to the Diversify Veterinary Medicine Coalition, that's something that has been an exciting first year. We've just launched our website not too terribly long ago, had a first event, partnering with the Thurgood Marshall College Fund for some exciting development and mentoring opportunities for underrepresented groups in the profession. So just so many wonderful things to see. We really do see the progress happening.
That's great. I love that point that you bring up, Laura. When the Pet Sustainability Coalition first got involved in really promoting and working on diversity, equity, inclusion, it was things that we found a lot of people that weren't particularly comfortable with talking about this topic. And I love that there's so many companies shifting the conversation from something that might not feel great to talk about to really as a way to bring people together and building relationships while so many of us are work from home and hundreds of miles apart. So I want to make sure that we have plenty of opportunity for our audience to ask questions for all you leaders, but I'd love to just round robin one more question for myself if I can. What advice would you give to a company or a DEI champion? Do you think there's kind of one thing that you think a company of any size can do to progress DEI at your company? Elizabeth, would love to start with you.
Sure. Sure. I think our first step, which is something that any company should do and could do, is taking an audit and an inventory of where we're at with your policies, with your programs, how you're recruiting, who you're attracting, and so that's the first step. Just taking inventory of where you're at, and then begin to develop your policies and plans from that place. And so that was our initial one, where we were in terms of developing our culture and what kind of policies would we put in place to ensure that we're creating an equitable and inclusive culture. And a lot of that looked right to our benefit plans. We offer 100% employer-funded medical, dental, and vision benefits. We, have 100% paid parental leave, and these aren't difficult first steps, and it's a starting point. And I think, once you do that, look at how you're recruiting, who you're attracting, your job descriptions. You look at pay equity, analyze your payroll, and then you can really kind of figure out how far along you are in your journey and what next steps you do need to take in order to further it.
Thank you, Elizabeth. One quick follow-up. With all of these amazing programs that you're using, are you using any metrics? What measuring systems are you using to measure progress on this goal?
So we have a few different metrics. So one, we have we have three specific metrics that we use. We upgraded our payroll system into this higher caliber payroll system. So that's where we can start tracking our ethnicity and start really analyzing our pay data. Secondly, we use a third-party employee engagement platform, which has been incredible, and that is called Amplify. And there's where we really are able to see, our culture and development, get feedback from our employees of where we're at. It measures psychological safety. It measures our onboarding process. It measures every aspect of what we're building and trying to do. So that's a big one. And third, we launched LinkedIn Recruiter, and that comes with a lot of tools and metrics to make sure each talent pipeline that we have for each open position is diverse, not only racially, but gender, age, demographics. I mean, going back to what Dr. Laura said, is that when the highlight of COVID was showing that we don't have to hire in our town of Connecticut, with this remote world, we can really open up our demographic and who we attract and how we appeal to a larger community.
That's perfect. Thank you, Elizabeth. Melissa, what about you? If you could think, what's one piece of advice or one thing that you think a company of any size can do to progress DEI at their organization?
Yeah, and I'll speak specifically to smaller organizations that we are. I'm the demand planning and purchasing manager, so I do a lot of the D&I work in my spare time, if you will. So my advice would be, don't wait until you have a perfectly developed strategy, like an academic strategy where you schedule workshops, hand out vocabulary sheets, and that kind of thing. Start with the conversations in a simple format. So in my own words, I consider this the humanistic strategy. So where you start conversations one-on-one or in small groups, showing an understanding and compassion for others, and show up to work as your own authentic self. So for me personally, I try to show by example by doing that. So I think that that's really important, to not wait until you have something perfect.
I love that. What is the phrase? Don't let perfection get in the way of improvement. I'm going to screw it up. I just knew I would.
Something like that.
I just love that. Thank you, Melissa. Dr. Lawyer, Melissa just gave a really great perspective on a smaller organization. Royal Canin is many things, but small is not one of them. What is one thing that you think any company of any size could do to progress DEI at their organization?
Yeah. So, for us, I think the focus has really been on leadership and the accountability for our leaders to activate, make those plans and activate on inclusion on every single team. We feel like, if you start there in a very large organization, it's very impactful. So that's kind of our one thing that we really make sure we focus on.
Great. And a quick follow-up with you, Dr. Laura. I'd love to ask you the same question we shot at Elizabeth. Are there any specific metrics? How are you tracking progress on these goals?
Yeah, there's some very specific goals that we are working towards. Gender balance is a very important one for us. We're aspiring to achieve gender balance across 100% of our leadership teams. And we also are working to increase racial minority representation in our leadership by 40%. So some pretty significant goals, and much like Elizabeth mentioned, we also do some internal surveys to measure inclusion through various ways that we do that, but we have a pretty high lofty goal, around that as well. So those are some things we're looking closely at.
Those are some really big goals, so congratulations on those. Caitlin, I could pick these ladies' brains for hours, but I don't want to be selfish. What questions do we have coming in from the audience?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Melissa, and to other Melissa, and Dr. Laura and Elizabeth as well. It's really great to get insights. And I wanted to just reverse slightly and set the stage. Can all three of you tell us how big your companies are? And let's go with employee size as a reference point so that we understand what perspective you're bringing to the table.
Who do you want to go first?
Should I jump in first? We're just hitting 60 employees.
All right, so 60 from Earth Animal. Melissa, how about at Only Natural Pet?
We are right around 60 as well.
Okay, and then how about within the bigger PetSmart community?
Wow, well, that would be about 55,000.
All right, and Dr. Laura?
Well, my goodness, we're talking hundreds with Royal Canin, several with multiple factories, probably getting close to 1,000. And then if you talk Mars, many, many, many more large businesses across the veterinary health business, CPG, you name it, thousands.
All right, well, thank you for giving that perspective so we can kind of understand, what scale and size business you're really operating within. We, on the line today with our 300 attendees, we have businesses of all sizes, so it's kind of helpful to know where you are. So I'm curious, do you have, and is it kind of integrated into your annual strategic plan? So are your DEI goals kind of a part of your annual strategic planning process? Sorry, let me pick on you, Dr. Laura. You can go first.
Yes, so I think that we're definitely seeing that be a larger part of that. And if you think about specifically the space that I work in on our veterinary team, you can see that something like an investing in the Diversified Vet Med Coalition, that's very much a part of our larger strategy with our stakeholders, understanding the importance of veterinarians to our mission to, feed more dogs and cats. So it absolutely is a part of it. And then when you look within Royal Canin, larger, we can't continue to serve our growing business without a much more diverse group of individuals. So absolutely.
Melissa, is diversity, equity, inclusion a part of your strategic planning process?
Yes, absolutely. And I would do the same thing and separate our participation in what PetSmart is doing, and we have some standalone goals as well for Only Natural Pet. So we feel very passionate about each associate working toward a 100-hour service commitment towards something relating to sustainability, and that includes diversity and inclusion. So the answer would definitely be yes. Our strategic goals would include many aspects of that.
And how about you, Elizabeth?
Yes, absolutely. I echo everything that my colleagues are saying here, and it's definitely a huge part, especially since we've been in growth mode for the past couple of years, and so it's integral to how every aspect of our business, how we attract and develop talent and add to our talent, how we grow globally, and also how we continue to build on this culture that we're trying to create the most inclusive and equitable culture we can.
Thanks for sharing that. So an interesting question came in around the connection between DEI and the labor shortage. So wondering if with the labor shortage, you think it's going to be easier for you to attract talent because you're really thinking about your hiring practices and maybe tapping into pools that you weren't before. I find often in the pet industry that people stay in the pet industry, and if there's not a lot of diversity from a pool you're pulling from, then it's a little bit difficult to hit those targets. So in some ways it might feel like, hey, actually we have a new pool of candidates that we're pulling from, and this is really exciting, and it might address this boundary. And in other ways it might feel like a challenge, right? Because you're so desperate for work that it's not always possible to go back and say, hey, are we reaching our DEI targets within our hiring strategy if your hiring strategy is under stress? So can you share a little bit about your perspective on that? Sorry, I'm not as good at assigning a speaker as Melissa is. Elizabeth, we'll start with you. Or you can all chime in, sorry. Each of you don't actually need to answer every question, so if any of you feel moved to respond to that, why don't you go ahead and respond? Give it
I guess I'm going to jump in because you called on me, but this is an interesting one for us, because we do hear a lot about the labor shortage, but I feel like it hasn't completely affected us at this time. So I haven't been faced with this issue. I do find, we talk about setbacks, and one of our challenges is kind of changing the mindset of some of how we historically approached recruiting, where must-have pet experiences is really important because, as you just pointed out, it does narrow the pool and who we attract. And one of our goals is changing the mindset and opening up just the talent pool to those outside of the pet industry. So that's something that we're definitely focused on. So I didn't totally answer your question because I don't think I've been hit with that issue yet.
And I think I would add too, I mentioned one of our loftiest goals was around gender balance, and not so much the labor shortage per se, but if we think about a lot of things that we've seen happen over the last year and a half, there were a lot of job and income losses that were coupled with family care responsibilities when you think about women. So one of the platforms that we have called Full Potential that Mars is leveraging for this lofty goal around gender balance really takes it into consideration and is focused on flexible work beyond COVID and looking at equal pay. So I think sometimes when we're faced with challenges like this in the marketplace, it's a good opportunity to really reset and move things in the right direction. And I think this platform is trying to do that.
And I would just chime in, I'm not directly involved in hiring myself, but I do think that the labor challenges have pushed all of us to look in some alternative places for candidates.
All right. Well, I know we're getting a little bit short on time. I wanted to make sure I have time for an additional question. So I'm curious if you could share with us a little bit about some of the partners that you've drawn on in order to support this work. I know for me, when we started to focus on diversity, equity, inclusion, as well as environmental justice, it was a little bit uncharted territory, and I felt like I really need to look for experts and find my voice and my space in this new topic. So I'm curious for each of you, if you've identified partners or collaborators that you've worked with over the last year or 2 years to really help propel you forward.
I'll jump in on this one. I think for us, definitely, our relationship with PetSmart is where we've turned, or I've turned in particular. They have many programs, trainings that we can tap into ourselves.
And I think for us, we have the benefit of having such an amazing resource in Mars as a global organization. And we've really built out our North American team recently with a lot of amazing people that have come from all over the industry. So that's been a big help. And then for me personally, I can tell you that experts at the AAVMC or working with the AVMA, some of those veterinary organizations that have some great resources has been instrumental for me in the veterinary space of this topic.
Uh-oh, Elizabeth, you are on silent again.
No.
Oh, now I can hear you.
Oh gosh. I was just gonna say that we have, since we've grown so tremendously in the past couple of years, one place I looked was internally last year in developing a DEI task force with so many people coming from different industries, different pockets of the world, and that helped kind of propel us forward. In addition, we partnered with you guys over at the PSA the last couple of years on education and learning. And then, I think as Dr. Hubbard said, my own network, I reached out to all former colleagues and friends at other companies, and we came together really to learn what those companies were doing. I think it was a really great opportunity for everybody to share. It wasn't, we were all at different places, but still on the journey. So I kind of looked outside and inside.
All right. Well, thank you to the three of you for being willing to join us and for sharing some of the journeys that you're on within your companies. And thank you not just to your companies, but to all of you for really taking the charge. Even if there's great momentum around something, every movement needs a leader. So really appreciate all of your efforts to lead this forward within your company. So thanks for your time today. I remember last year we were here celebrating our 30 days to 1,000 actions toward a more diverse, equitable, and inclusive company, and all three of your organizations participated heavily in that. So it's great to just revisit 1 year later. And as a reminder, this isn't going away. This is a long journey, and really excited to be able to showcase what some of your businesses have been doing over the last year to continue progress. And I'm excited to hear about what happens next year as well when we bring additional leaders to the forefront to continue to bring this issue to the forefront and encourage everyone to maintain their momentum in this growing and much needed space. So really appreciate all of you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for inviting me.